This painting is called Lenten Rose, and this painting is an example of things that inspire me to paint. These flowers were growing outside our front door on a snowy March morning, and the snow had just begun to melt, and there in the brown and dirty leaves coming up through were these beautiful white flowers called Lenten roses. And I went and grabbed my camera and took a few shots of them and went in, and I instantly started drawing and painting. So this painting, I hope, is sort of a sign of the upcoming spring. I tried to capture the sunlight that was on them at the second. And this is a painting, an example of a painting that I do in a little more abstract style. If you look more closely, you'll see that I have a lot of outlining in it. The flowers are quite realistic from a distance, but when you come in closer, they do not exhibit photorealism qualities. So this was a really fun painting at the end of March to try to get me into the feeling of spring. This painting is called Ode to Spring, since it has all the spring flowers in it, daffodils and iris. It's a much more formal painting. This is more photorealistic than my other painting was. And it's centered, it's a very symmetrical painting. It was done actually as a painting for my sister, and she had requested this particular setup, and so I did it for her, and it turned out it did very well and was entered in many shows and received several awards. This painting is called Apricots and Sweet Peppers, and this painting actually is in a little more abstracted style. If you look more carefully, you can see I did a lot of outlining. Again, you'll see my vibrant colors, which I just love. I did a lot of exaggeration in this. When you look more closely, you'll see that all the lines are exaggerated. When you step back, you can tell what it is, but up close it's a little more abstract. This painting actually was in a major show in Chicago and won the Jurors Award. Actually, I was born in Brockport. I was born here and raised here. I went to elementary school and high school in Brockport, and when I graduated from high school, I decided to pursue my higher education at SUNY Brockport to become a teacher. So I did that, and then I taught elementary school for 33 years right here in Brockport. So I am the original Brockport native, born, raised, and lived my whole life here. My parents owned the Dobson drugstore on Main Street well, that was in existence for almost 100 years. And it closed in the mid-60s, mostly because the big chain drugstores came in and drove it out of business. Actually, I taught school for 33 years. I taught 3rd grade and 4th grade, and I always have enjoyed working with art. I never really pursued any art classes while I was in college, but I always had the knack for producing some very interesting and creative work. And when I taught 3rd grade, I always did a lot of art projects in conjunction with science and social studies, just because I loved it, and I know the kids loved doing it, and they learned a lot by producing a mural of the water cycle rather than just reading about it in the book. So toward the end of my teaching career, as part of teacher training, I took a course in Rochester at the at the Memorial Art Gallery called the Aesthetic Education Institute. And that institute provided an opportunity for teachers to work with artists in various forms, artists such as the visual arts, creative arts, photography, dancing. I worked with Garth Vagan and learned to dance with him. I learned to play the harp. I took lessons in painting. And when I took this watercolor class in painting, I thought, oh boy, this is really a lot of fun. Maybe when I retire, I will pursue watercolor painting. And that was just 4 or 5 years before I retired. So that seed had been planted in my mind, and I had thought about it, and actually went out and I bought a few watercolor paints, but I was never very good at it. Never had the time to invest in it until I retired. So when I did finally decide to leave teaching, I knew that I wanted to pursue art classes. So immediately in September, after retiring, I went to the Memorial Art Gallery and took a class in drawing, actually, because you really need to draw before you can paint. So I learned to draw, and then I took classes in watercolor painting, and slowly but surely I began to see progress. And as with anything, it's just time and toil, and you get better and better. And that's what happened. I just invested a lot of time, a lot of energy, and had a lot of fun learning to paint. And I took several classes in Rochester, made a lot of new friends, just had a lot of fun. So it wasn't something that was a difficult thing to do. I was just enjoying myself. I never thought in my wildest dreams that my artwork would get to the status that it is today. About 1.5 years after retiring, and I had been working on my watercolor painting, I had a painting I thought was pretty good. I was pleased with it, and my watercolor teacher was pleased with it. So I decided to send a slide of it to a show in Buffalo, and it was a show, a national watercolor show, actually. And I never thought in my wildest dreams it would be accepted into the show, but lo and behold, it was. And that was just so literally exciting to me. And so time for the show came, and we went to the opening reception, and lo and behold, it had not only been accepted, but it had won an award. So I was just beside myself. I couldn't believe it. So of course that motivated me even more to pursue my painting, and I continued to take various workshops with nationally known watercolor artists. And as time went by, I was accepted into more and more watercolor shows, and ended up in a show in New York City and another show in Chicago. And actually I have a painting now that's traveling the United States in a national show. So all of this just sort of happened, but there again, there was a lot of work involved, but a lot of fun. I have to say, I paint for fun. I don't paint for other people. Some people will ask if I will paint something for them that matches their sofa, and I don't do that sort of thing. I paint because it's something that has to come from me onto the paper, and then if somebody likes that, that's fine. I would sell it to them, but I don't have other people tell me what I should paint, because then I don't think my soul is in it. So my paintings tend to be full of color. They're very vibrant, with strong values, darks and lights in them. I like to paint challenging things such as crystal and silver, which to me is the most fun of anything to do. I love to do, it's like a meditation. When I get into painting crystal in a vase, you just get lost in all the facets of the crystal. And it's not as difficult as most people think. If you just look carefully, the trick to painting anything is using your eyes and looking at it, what it is that you're going to paint, and look carefully at every shape. And if you just paint the shapes, when you step back from your work, you'll say, oh, I painted a crystal vase because that's what appears on the paper. So it's actually a lot of fun, and I'm enjoying it a lot. After winning an award in the first show, which was a national show in Buffalo, I was very, very excited and motivated to paint even more. And I now had an idea of what it was that the juror was looking for so that I could be accepted into even more shows. I knew, for example, that they would like to see a painting that was unusual, something they hadn't seen before. A flower in the middle of a painting they've seen 1,000 times. You take that flower and crop it off and maybe zoom in on it the way that Georgia O'Keeffe did, then you have something a little bit unique, and they would be more apt to choose a painting such as that. Also, that's when I began to get into working with crystal and silver, and I found that jurors very often were drawn to that because it drew the viewer into the painting. You really wanted to take a closer look to see, how did she do that? Mm-hmm. And that's the type of work that they were drawn to. And I found more and more when I did send in paintings of that sort, they were being accepted into the shows. One of the things I always try to do in my paintings is to draw the viewer in, to look at the minute details, not just look at the big picture, but say, wow, how did she do that? I have to take a closer look. And the closer they come, the more they will see. And I think that is one thing that the jurors liked in my paintings also. There are many, many artists that I admire, and perhaps in some way I incorporate my love for their paintings into mine, but I try to make my paintings unique. I try to make them say, this is a Dianne Hickerson. I don't want them to say, this is Georgia O'Keeffe or some other artist. I don't want to imitate another artist, even though I admire them. So that has been my goal, is to create work that is uniquely mine, even though maybe elements of it imitate other artists. I hope that I have achieved that. People tell me that I have. And I think probably what my paintings show you is the bright color. What make my paintings stand out and show that they are uniquely mine are the bright colors, the strong values, the use of maybe an unusual perspective, the close-up view. I often will crop in a painting. I have a painting here where I cropped it in and showed mostly the crystal and sort of cut off the flowers. And people will say to me, why did you cut the flowers off? And I said, well, the painting is more about the crystal than it is about the flowers. So I try to make it about something and bring people to the center of interest and try to make them see what it is that I saw that inspired me to make this painting. And that is what my goal is in all of my work. I tend to go back and forth in my work. Sometimes I will do florals, sometimes I will do a still life. I've done a couple paintings of New York City, which actually have done very well. So I don't always stay with the same subject matter. And actually, I have a couple styles. I have a more abstract style in some of my work, and some of it is very realistic. So I sort of flip-flop back and forth just for my own interest and for my own satisfaction, and to keep me interested in what it is that I'm doing. This is called Promises of Spring. And again, I was motivated to paint it on, it was beginning of April, and the daffodils were just beginning to bloom. I raced outside, picked a few, put them in this vase, took a few photos of them because they tend to die in a hurry, and began this painting. And as I started the drawing, I thought, well, you know, I'm very interested in the crystal in this painting, more so than I am the flowers. So I will put the flowers in, but I won't make it about the flowers. I'll make it more about the crystal by concentrating on that. Therefore, I cut off the top of the arrangement. And it's funny because many people say to me, well, how come you cut the flowers off? And I said, well, it's more about the crystal than it is the flowers. And then they'll say, oh, I see. Oh, I like that. Actually made several sales by telling them that. So this is one of the examples where I just love doing the crystal. I loved looking at all the different sights that I saw inside the glass. And the flowers were sort of secondary, although they were what inspired me to make the painting. This painting is called 47th and Broadway. And what inspired me to do this painting is my husband and I were in New York City to go to the American Watercolor Society show in which I had a painting being exhibited. So we flew down to New York City in a snowstorm. And we stayed overnight and went to the exhibit the next day. And by then the snow had started to melt and the streets were very wet. So after the exhibit, we went out to eat at Fridays in Times Square. When we came out from lunch, we were on the way to the airport, and I said to my husband, I haven't even taken a picture of New York City yet. So I took my camera out, and I took one picture this way and one picture that way. And when I got home, I looked at those pictures, and I thought, oh, I would love to do a painting of New York City, but I only have these two foggy pictures to work with. But I tried my best, and this is what I came up with. It's kind of the abstract style that I talked about because I couldn't do a more realistic style because I had no visual source to look at. My photos were very blurry. So this is 47th and Broadway, and this painting this is actually a giclée reproduction of the original painting. The original painting is touring the United States right now. And a funny story about this particular painting is the truck in the painting was originally a Ryder truck, and a man from C&M Forwarding asked if he could commission me to take this painting, erase the Ryder, and put in C&M Forwarding, which I did. So he's going to pick this up this afternoon, and that's why it's sitting in my living room. So that's waiting for him. But this is an example of a type of painting that normally you wouldn't think that I do. Normally I do landscapes florals and still life. So a city scene is not my usual type of painting, but this had special meaning to me, and I think that's why it did so well.